Today, I just want to touch a little bit about systems. We keep hearing about systems. We keep hearing about past 2080. So what are all these things about, and how does it relate to us in the room being involved in buildings and infrastructure? The first thing I want to say, if you don't know past 2080, please have a look. I mean, I was a member in the technical author team between Mott MacDonald and Arab. We published earlier in the year. And please have a look at especially the guidance document that has some really good practical case studies. So when we're talking about systems in the terms of past 2080, this is a definition from past 2080. But yeah, it's essentially collection, interconnection of physical facilities and human interactions. No. This diagram on the left-hand side is from the Center of Digital Build Britain. You've seen it before, hopefully. But the key message here is that a system is essentially a very complex ecosystem of relationships, of assets, nature, people, and other more esoteric things. So we really struggled when we were talking about past 2080 and introducing the concept of systems for decarbonization and co-benefits with resilience, with nature, of what exactly does it mean for us delivering projects and programs of work in the built environment. So this is a diagram from past 2080. If we look at the right-hand side, all I want to introduce is the fact that the PAS recognizes there is a nested relationship between assets, networks, and systems. An asset can be a building, can be a bridge, can be a pumping station, a pipeline. A network can be a building development, or it can be the water, wastewater network, or the road network, or a rail network. And a system could be a sector of infrastructure like transport, water, it could be a geography, a city. We're having a cities panel a bit later. But the whole point here is that traditionally we have been focusing on decarbonizing and reducing capital operational carbon at the asset level, because that's more practical when we understand it like that better. So we have a target at the asset level and let's go for it. But the PAS recognizes all the complexities around achieving net zero and meeting other outcomes as well that are really important for any system, is that focusing on a specific asset will not take us to net zero, no way. So we need to start looking a little bit upwards. On the left-hand side, what the PAS shows in this diagram is essentially the different value chain members in different colors here that are involved in one way or another in planning and delivering buildings and infrastructure projects and programs of work, which can happen, by the way, in any part of this triangle. And what it also shows is that these people, from asset owners, managers, constructors, designers, product material suppliers, you see government regulators, investors up there as well, where the PAS gives more specific guidance. You see that these people have got different levels of direct control of emissions in each of those levels, but also the PAS recognizes that they can influence things in a big way. So it's not about just, let's say I'm a designer or an asset owner. I'm not just going to have to wait for government to tell me what to do. I can still do things and influence the wider system, but the people who have more direct control from a policy perspective could be government regulators, multiple asset owners, etc. So this is, it's quite complex, but the whole thing is like, okay, so what exactly does this mean? And if you ask me, I mean, I find when I hear of systems, I visualize, you know, these dots and the bubbles and the links and all this stuff, which is great, but it's a little bit esoteric for me. I mean, I'm an engineer by background. What does this mean? So if I'm any member of the value chain, what does a system practically approach mean for me, and especially for decarbonization, which is quite hard to achieve? So I wanted to try and deconstruct this challenge. I'm not going to give you solutions, I think, perhaps some examples, but perhaps some food for thought. So the way we went about this was under three different angles in the PAS team and from discussions with different stakeholders in our industry, from different value chain members. Why is it hard? So a quick glimpse of the great work of our colleagues at the Committee for Climate Change. This is from the 6th Carbon Budget. You've all seen this diagram. I'm not going to go too much detail. Essentially, this is a snapshot of the balanced pathway for the UK to achieve net zero by 2050. And there are different actions and recommendations and trajectories from different sectors of the economy, from a UK PLC point of view of what needs to happen by when. Okay, great. This is not simple, by the way. Yes, I know we have people from the CC here. Very sophisticated piece of work. Great. Okay, so if I'm a sector of the economy, if I'm an asset owner, if I'm whoever member of the value chain, what exactly does this mean for me? And one of the things I wanted to discuss here is this has been triggered from it's a conceptual diagram that has been triggered by some conversations ongoing in our water sector in the UK, especially in the last year, 18 months. Please, this is just purely dummy data, but we have been discussing with water companies, with some of our regulators, government. When I mean government, I mean DEFRA and our colleagues in business, back then BASE. It's just to understand, okay, so we know as a sector, we are having to build loads of things in the next 25, 30 years to meet some regulatory requirements from the Environment Act, meaning and climate hazards. Like we know in the UK, there is a big program of major strategic water resource options we need to account for to face the future climate risks of drought for water supply. So this, we're talking about big infrastructure projects. At the same time, we need to sort out our stormwater overflows. Yeah, so we've seen it all over the news. At the same time, we need to integrate more nature-based solutions. At the same time, we need to decarbonize our own operations and our supply chain, scope 1, 2, 3. And at the same time, we have an idea of a target as a sector for our operational emissions, at least from our water sector commitment to 2030. But then we don't really have an agreed trajectory of how to translate the UK pathways work that the CCC has done into what it means for us, which is the red line. So all these different bits you're seeing here, the different colors, are essentially representing a number of scenarios. So if you have to build all these things to meet the outcomes, there is no way you're going to be underneath that red line, the trajectory, which is the hypothetical, if you like, arbitrarily applied 6 carbon budget balance pathway to our water sector. And this is that top-down view, which is the fact that the system, which is the biggest challenge and the biggest gap we have in any country in the world, that we haven't been looking at decarbonization and other outcomes more systemically, top-down. That's why the arrow's pointing downwards, to understand what types of interventions we need to have in our asset base, if you like, in the lower levels of the triangle. And for me, this is the most complicated thing that requires more kind of strategic dialogue that is evidence-based with our regulators, our governments, our multiple asset owners in the system. Going to the guidance document of the past 2080, I'm trying to advertise a little bit here. So please have a look. This is one example of a case study, some study done in the buildings world by Sheffield University and UCL. It's exactly a similar concept. So they took the building stock in England and they tried to understand, okay, so how can we meet the CCC budget, carbon budget in the building stock in England by having different interventions here, from wall insulation, double glazing, air source heat pumps. And the main solutions that are under this line are essentially the ground source heat pumps and air source heat pumps. Anything else will not get you to the budget. And this is a more clearly defined budget. And what it takes me here is to continue the story from this top-down challenge, is the fact that mainly we operate on the right-hand side where we have a project, we have a baseline, we have a target to meet, but how do we know these targets are aligned to a geographical system or sectoral system? This is a very, very complex issue that we need to address. This is another example from the guidance document. I just want to build the point that Lord Dibben also mentioned. This is the example, classic example of interdependency mapping in urban planning, Atlanta versus Barcelona. The members in our TA team for past 2080 were very passionate to include that study done by UCL, where 5 million population cities, and essentially you can see the difference in urban planning, how dense the buildings are and the people live, how close, and having efficient transport corridors means that the per capita carbon emissions are an order of magnitude, like almost a bigger order of magnitude. Atlanta is about 7 tons per person and Barcelona is just over 1. So that systems thinking is really required to unlock things. The second angle I wanted to make quite quickly, this is good news, yeah? Not everything is doomed here. So we have many people in the audience here that they focus on major assets, being buildings or infrastructure. And they have shown us, and we have some great case studies that you can find in the guidance document from HS2, Anglian Water, other utilities and developments, where essentially you're taking an asset that you have confirmed their need to be built. Need could be questionable and it can be very political, like HS2, for example, or a reservoir or a pipeline. And then you take a systems approach of how to essentially unlock further decarbonization in the wider system. Yeah, so you take the bottom-up approach to this. So, for example, in the guidance document case studies, we have some case studies from Anglian Water where they look at exporting waste heat from some of the wastewater treatment works and transfer it to a tomato greenhouse over there, which is basically helping decarbonize their own operations. Or we have HS2, some studies that were presented to Parliament to see what is the benefit of emissions by removing freight from the road to electrified railway. So the message here, which is great, all the work that has been done, is that the systems approach pushing upwards is still the right thing to do. And the last angle I wanted to take was essentially looking at our supply chain that Lord Ibn mentioned as well, as an ecosystem. One of the biggest challenges I mentioned earlier is for us needing to build stuff, loads of things to help with meeting various outcomes. Even in the energy sector, the energy transition requires loads of things to be built, from wind farms to solar farms to hydrogen facilities. And all these scope 3 emissions require quite a lot of materials, rely on very complex supply chains that come from all over the world, even from territories that we don't even know whether they have any decarbonization targets. So this angle of the system challenge is about how do we, as the value chain, asset owners, designers, constructors, product material suppliers, how do we actually mobilize a certain ecosystem in our supply chain to accelerate change and try and work out and trace where all these emissions are that we can control and how to reduce them so we can hopefully be under the line, which is a bit tricky. So one example here I gave, there are various industry initiatives, especially in the concrete and steel industry. In the UK, this is a snapshot from the low carbon route map, concrete route map, that was sponsored by the Green Construction Board and the Institution of Civil Engineers. There is a lot of activity in the infrastructure client group that a few of you are there, which is about saying, okay, what can the concrete industry do together, mobilizing all these global supply chains to come up with alternative products, becoming more efficient, etc. And the question always back is, okay, who pays for this if it's more expensive? And is there anything we can do as an industry then, using the buying power, the massive buying power, if you collect many of the big asset owners in buildings and infrastructure, to pre-order some of these things and have the right mechanisms in the contract? And this is quite interesting to see. That's why I put it here. The other thing to note when you're talking about scope 3 emissions and capital carbon is that any national target is under a territorial basis, which means anything we import, it's not really counting in our national target, which is, again, is it the right thing to do? What our leading organizations are doing. And lastly, I just wanted to leave you, again, this is from past 28 guidance document, have a look, please. What I want to leave you with is, again, you see all these boxes of the different value chain members. It's all about, I know we keep talking about collaboration, we need to collaborate, but the question is when and how, in order to really tackle this system challenge and find together a solution. It's hard. If you ask me, I don't have the answers, but yeah, hopefully there are enough people and brains in this room to make it happen. All I want to say before I go is that we're planning to do a deeper dive in some of these concepts in some clinics we're organizing end of November as a breakfast session, and it would be great to invite you to these if you're interested on systems. And that's it from me. I think I'm on time. Yeah, great. Thank you.